everybody, and welcome to the show, The Garage and the Court of Public Opinion, for another day, June 8th, a few dates, and then we'll get into the stuff of the day with a jet going across the top. We've had some wild weather here. So what's a low-flying jet? Nothing. No, actually, it's on the flight path, but I never noticed. You don't really... It doesn't bother me, anyway. June the 8th. 1928, the first US to Australia flight. The first US to Australia flight lands. Charles Kingsford Smith. Sir Charles at the controls. 1928. 1955, there is a name, there is a man, Tim Berners-Lee, the English inventor. He invented the World Wide Web. Never ever wanted to get any money out of it. Can you imagine what the World Wide Web would have been worth had he pursued it? You know, like an entrepreneur might have. Tim Berners-Lee, the World Wide Web, born in London in 1955. In 1824 on this day, the washing machine was patented by Noah Cushing of Quebec. 1924. I think we've seen something about washing machines going back a few months, haven't we, Pete?
Yes.
Yeah, there was a sort of a plunger or something. It was an advancement on the old copper. You still see some of the old coppers at auction from time to time. But this is the first washing machine. The first car theft. Baron de Zulen's Peugeot is stolen by his mechanic in Paris in 1896. I tell you, I saw the funniest movie I've ever seen. No, I've actually seen it before. It was Monsieur Hulot's Holiday. It was The Pink Panther, Inspector Clouseau, and not the one with Peter Sellers. A later one, but beautifully done. Very clever. Laughed till I cried. 1651, William Dampier, the English explorer and pirate, who was the first Englishman to explore parts of Australia and the first person to circumnavigate the world 3 times. Born in East Cocker in Somerset, England. He died in 1715 and he was born this day in 1651. American singer and actress Judy Garland. She was 29. American producer Sidney Luft was 36. They were married in California on this day in 1952 and divorced in 1965. Nancy Sinatra, the American singer and actress, weds the American producer... Oh, I'm sorry, I've skipped it. Nancy Sinatra. These boots are made for walking. Something Stupid was probably the biggest song that she had. Don't know. Well, when Frank Sinatra is singing with you, you really can't miss. And when Frank Sinatra is your dad, you're pretty well made. Frank Sinatra and Nancy Sinatra. Anyway, born to stay in Jersey City, in New Jersey in 1940. Nancy Sinatra. Frank Lloyd Wright, the American architect, Guggenheim and all of that, recognized as the greatest American architect of all time. He was born on this day in 1867 and he died in 1959. I never understood. Have you ever seen any of his buildings, Pete?
Not that I know.
Well, they're sort of, for his time, I mean, I guess they were very modern, ultra-modern, in fact. But why? I mean, it's like Picasso and so many of these other people. We get bullied into thinking something is really wonderful when maybe we don't. Stuff of legend is made, I think, partly because of intimidation. Nippon Airlines announced that painting eyeballs on their jets cut bird collisions by 20%. Just thought I'd throw that in. That was this. Well, I'm sure it seemed like a good idea at the time. That was this day in 1988. Happy birthday to Boz Scaggs. The Lido Shuffle, and he had some wonderful songs. He was born in Canton, Ohio in 1944, still going strong. Bing Crosby records Silent Night on this day in Time's Up. 1942, and Joan Rivers. I love Joan Rivers. So funny. Do you ever see Joan Rivers with Barry Humphries? What fun. We just don't make people like that anymore. Joan Rivers, American comedian, actress, The Late Show, Hollywood Squares, born in Brooklyn, New York in 1933, and she died in 2014. Whenever I had her on the show, and it was quite often, every opportunity I had to get her on the show, I did. And she came to Australia quite often. You had to have your finger on the panic button. Couldn't stray too far from the panic button. No. Well, it's only a job. Speaking of comings and goings, I saw that Astrid Gilberto has died at the age of 83. The Girl from Ipanema. That was her breakout hit. But the interesting thing about Astrid Gilberto was that she had never sung a song before, never made a record. She worked as a translator at the recording studio, and they wanted to hear in the recording studio how this new Antonio Carlos Jobim song, The Girl from Ipanema, sounded in English. One take, and the world had discovered the bossa nova. And also greats like that whole genre, Stan Getz and Charlie Bird, songs like Desafinado. Do you remember that, Pete?
No.
Desafinado. Oh, it was a lovely, sleepy, sexy song. The music of Brazil, and Rio de Janeiro, and Carnival. And we owe it all, really, to Astrid Gilberto. I never knew whether she called herself Astrid Gilberto or Astrid Gilberto, but sadly no longer with us. We lost a good one there. 83, good age though. Interest rates, as we discussed, as we sort of predicted with a bit of caution, went up 0.25%. We will pay, if it's passed on, doesn't have to be, by the way, you know. We will pay 4.1%. That's pretty low, historically. When people who are complaining, you know, look at their mortgage, look at the interest rates, and maybe should think back to when they took that loan out, you know. A lot of people took out loans when the interest rates were rock bottom, 0.1%, lower than rock bottom. Rates have never been that low in the history of Australia. Did anyone who took out a loan at that interest rate imagine that they would stay there for long? The truth is that 4.1%, this is after 12 increases, mind you, in my memory, is still ridiculously low. I don't think it's going to tip us into recession. I suppose it could with the latest GDP figures. But look, talk to Paul Keating, who drove the interest rates up to 22% and then into the recession we had to have, you might remember. Yes, he lost the election. But the commentators of today were children back then, and they don't remember. And their chiefs of staff and their editors probably don't remember. This is the truth. This is the lay of the land. 1/3 of people have a mortgage. Only 1/3. 1/3 rent a property. 1/3 are self-funded retirees looking for a greater return on their invested savings. And again, I can't remember how many times I said it and how many times I've heard other people say it, that if you took out a loan at these extremely low interest rates, you must work on, when things get back to normal, an interest rate of between 5 and 7%. That is normal. That's what most of us lived with, except for the Paul Keating aberration, of course, and the Whitlam aberration. But 5 to 7% is normal if you average it out over a 20-year period. 0.1% is not normal. I mentioned the GDP figures, they are out. We still have growth, but not a lot. Just 0.2% added to the wealth of our great country. This is in the first few months of the year, the March quarter. The economy is growing at virtually what you might call stall speed, dangerously close to going backwards. But for the year, it's 2.3%, which, when you look at the global situation, it's not bad. Not terrific, but it's not bad. We can live with that. A new government in Western Australia. Mark McGowan has resigned. As we talked about briefly, I think last week, he was exhausted. I guess it does take it out of one, being the head of the state, the head of the parliament, the head of the government. Roger Cook is the new premier. What I liked about Mark McGowan, apart from being a good general manager, was that he understood where the wealth of Western Australia was coming from. The mining industry and the entrepreneurs. You don't kill or threaten to kill the goose that's laying the golden egg. The other thing I liked about him was that he had one flag. Actually, there were two Australian flags behind him when he gave a press conference, a news conference. I'd like to talk to you at length later, perhaps another time, next week or something, about this issue of the flags. I don't think it's even constitutional for the Prime Minister and various premiers to stand in front of an Australian flag, an Aboriginal flag, and a Torres Strait Island flag. When you consider that Torres Strait Island is number 64,000 in Australia, that's including the Torres Strait Islands. Wow, that's weird. One nation under one flag. And if that offends people, I'm sorry, but that's how it should be. And if you don't think it should be like that, tell me. I'd like the feedback. Here's a less than fun fact. 20% of our school kids drop out before completing their education. I don't know what's behind that. I don't know. The NAPLAN thing tells me that we're not educating children. There's an element there where we are indoctrinating them or trying to indoctrinate them, but we're not indoctrinating them with the reading, writing and arithmetic, which without those tools, they would find education very difficult. But it's not acceptable that we have 20% of kids dropping out of school before they finish. That's not right. Somebody should do something about that. At least we should be talking about it. Well, we are in the court of public opinion, of course. Did you know that here in Australia, I heard this morning, 200,000 tonnes of clothing we send to landfill. 200,000 tonnes of clothing sent to landfill, a lot of it still good, useful, wearable clothes. What is that? Is that fashion? Petulance? Is it prosperity? I've worn this once, I'll throw it away? I don't know. It's a lot of clothes. The people who brought this to our attention, I've never heard of them before, but RAP Asia Pacific, non-profit outfit, never heard of them, as I said. But what they wanted to do, and they've put it to the fashion industry, who are apparently have accepted it, embraced it. They want a levy, a 4-cent levy on every garment sold. Now, I don't know what that would do, what good it would do. It would put 4 cents on every garment we bought. So what? How is that going to stop people sending stuff to landfill? Look, the simple thing, and it wouldn't cost a lot of money to have, and it would be a good, decent thing to do, by the way, a promotion for op shops. Just take useful clothing to your nearest op shop, and next time you buy, do that in an op shop. I mean, this nice tweed jacket, Harris Tweed. I don't know what it cost new. I don't know what I paid for it. I bought it at Vincent de Paul down on Glen Osmond Road. Paid $12 or $15 or something for it. And it's perfectly good. I need to lose a bit of weight before it fits me properly, but that's all right. There's a lot of stuff that we can get wear out of, or somebody else can get wear out of. We don't throw things away. No. The homeless index, or homelessness index. I didn't know there was such a thing as the homelessness index, but apparently there is, and it's up 8% on last year. In other words, people who had a home last year no longer have a home this year. Is that what? What's that, the cost of living? I would suggest the cost of living. No reason other than the costs that are going up. What do you think, Pete?
Well, there's lack of supply too.
Well, that feeds into everything.
Lack of properties.
Yes. Well, it's a big problem. A lot of people are doing a lot of talking about it, but not a lot of action I don't see. I worry about the cost of living aspect to all of this, because the big element there is the government-sponsored cost of electricity. You know, you just pile all these expenses on people, and hell. Have I got time for a little more? Head of the Reserve Bank, Philip Lowe, had a thought on the housing crisis. Perhaps, he said, more people could share accommodation. Well, he's right. When I left home, I couldn't afford to live anywhere. I shared with 3 or 4 other people, and if I had the courage, I'd go out there and I'd sign the lease and then stick a little sign up at the notice board at Channel 10 or 2GB or wherever I was working, and I said, you know, there's accommodation, looking for 3 flatmates. You've got 4 bedrooms, and a lot of those places in Sydney you can get a really good deal. This is back in the 60s and 70s, but you know, you don't expect to walk into a house. You share a house. I think that's okay. I think he might be onto something. It might not be the ideal situation, of course it isn't, but anything to reduce the demand will also lower the cost. But of course, they laughed and they sneered at him because they like doing that. We have, you see, a sense of entitlement. I should have a free house. And if it doesn't happen, the government can give me one. What's wrong with the government? Can't they see I need a house? But a lot of these people think that they can or should freeze or cap rents. Now, you'd fix one problem and you'd create another. It ain't that simple. You see, there are millions and millions of small mom and dad investors who are trying to look after their futures. Obviously, well, I won't say obviously because I don't think anyone makes anything of it, but perhaps I should say notably, the Prime Minister. Yes, Anthony Albanese. I believe he has 5 investment properties, and good on him. And I'll bet he has them rented out at a market rent. He would be irresponsible not to. Governments should be encouraging us to do more of this sort of thing for ourselves. Yes, do more for ourselves. The last person to interfere with the small property investor was Paul Keating. And that didn't work out terribly well. And I'm sure it played a part in Labor being kicked out of office. I don't think they'll touch negative gearing, but I suppose the 22% interest rates didn't help Paul either. Rough time. Politics is a rough game. Thank you for viewing the Court of Public Opinion, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeremy Cordeux. Peter Clayton and I'll be back tomorrow. End of the week. Believe in yourself. Goodbye for now.